My name is Jeff St Laurent. This is the Live Tuesday call. And we just spent a good amount of time with the people that called in today as they were kind of giving me their feedback in terms of what they're looking for around the topic today, which is asking for the money so we can get paid for our coaching. You know, asking for anything for that matter is challenging for a lot of people, but especially when it comes to asking for money. It's challenging, and whether it comes from growing up with our parents or just even asking a spouse for money. Maybe you're a stay-at-home dad or mom or unemployed for whatever reason, and you're having to ask for money, right? It's challenging sometimes. So we want to adjust that because as entrepreneurs, we must be able to do that. And even if we're able to do it, here's the next phase to it. As I say, it's doing it, but then it's doing it feeling comfortable. And then it's also the next level, I'd say, is doing it and having fun doing it. Like now I love doing it. It's fun because I understand the process and I'm not intimidated by it. But rewind, since 2004, right? So like 13, 14 years or so, I remember, before I understood the things that I'll teach today, it was very uncomfortable. And I'd get to that spot where I knew it was time to ask. And I'd be like, goop, and I just have this pit in my stomach and my chest was tight. So we'll start going over that today and hopefully help further you down that road of just creating more ease in that situation. And that's what we're going for. A couple of things to note: I do record all my Tuesday calls. They're in my university, sellingcoaching.com. So go ahead and check that out there. I just posted the 80th call last week, so we're on a roll there. So a lot of great information for you. Also on my website, sellingcoaching.com, right on the front page there, I have a great resource called the Ultimate Startup Guide for New Coaches. So please check that out and take advantage of that. That will also put you on my email community so you can start not only seeing what I'm doing there and modeling from an email marketing perspective to keeping my audience engaged. That's important to see as a coach, but also keep you aware of when I'm doing my calls, the topics, and then more importantly, I have some great content that I put in there as well each week. So check that out. And then lastly, at the top of my website, sellingcoaching.com, I have an invitation to join my private Facebook group. That's a great community, especially if you're looking to start to speak and articulate your message. Do a lot with video in there and helping coaches really, as I hope coaches transition to full-time, that's a great medium not only for us to interact, but like I said, to speak your message. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to grow your audience, which is what you're growing your business is, or what it means anyways, we've got to be able to speak our message just like I do, like on calls like this each and every week. So with that being said, we're transitioning onto that topic of asking for the money. And as I was saying before, it's being able to do that and being able to do it with a lot more ease. And so there are components that go along with this that will make it easier and make it more fun for you. And then really, I'd say the most important part is beyond even the easy and the fun is that it actually works so people actually hire you. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, yes, it's all about helping people, but we can't help people if they're not buying what we're putting out there, right? So we've got to be able to figure that out. And so I want to break it down, and I want to kind of focus more on some of the things around maybe some of I would call it maybe the logistics of it, maybe the more black and whites of it. Because as I mentioned just a minute ago, is that a lot of our, if you will, our apprehensions or fears or tightness, as I was saying, my chest would get tight, my stomach would be like, oh, or the uneasiness around asking for money can come from our past, or I would call it our conditioning, from growing up and from our circle of influence, mostly, let's say, parents and or friends or some people like that we've just observed it by default, and we're conditioned, and therefore subconsciously that translates into an inability or an uncomfortability, as I would say, when it comes to this topic. And especially now you're bringing that into a place where, especially with coaching, recognizing the challenging aspect of it is really that we are the service, right? Like we're the coach. So they're hiring us and our ability. So especially early on when we're like, we think we know what we're doing, but we really think we don't know what the hell we're doing. And it's just like, oh, or we haven't done much, if any of it. We might have had the practice through, let's say, a coaching school or certification or maybe nothing. So it's like, well, how do I know? How can I believe in what I do and what I'm offering? Never mind actually charge someone for it, because then automatically we can feel like there's this sort of pressure to perform, especially when someone pays me for something, right? And so now it's like, ooh, I better be good because they paid me, right? So recognizing that there's a lot of those pressures that really we just put on ourselves, but also I just want to honor the fact that, you know what, this is something that we're selling and it's us. And as entrepreneurs, especially a lot of people coming from a non-entrepreneurial background, like an employee background, we've never had to do that. Even if you've sold stuff before, you're selling other people's things, products, or other people's services, and you're just the facilitator of that. You're not actually, and then you're just shipping them something or you're sending them somewhere else. It's very, very different than selling them something that you're offering and then actually following through and then providing that service. Very, very different. I can't tell you how many people that I've mentored with who have a background and they say, oh, I have a background in sales, right? And they've sold and they've maybe created especially great success, let's just say monetarily, in that selling field or whatever. And then when they come here, I can't tell you how many people say like, oh my God, it's so different. And I'll say what that difference is just what I said. It's the fact that now you're not selling another product or service. You're selling yourself, essentially. So when I say I want to kind of break this down, hopefully a little bit more logistically or black and white, is because with that piece and with let's say the conditioning that each one of us may or may not have, from growing up, etc. It's hard to gauge, how that actually affects us. But with some of the things that I want to start talking about, there's some very concrete things that you can actually do regardless of whatever your conditioning has been or background's been, that can start to make this process a little bit easier when you start to understand the mechanics of it. And that's why I like mechanics. Like, to me, the mechanics of selling, if you will, they can be more black and white when you understand them. And then you bring that understanding to the live situation, which of course has its own energy and its own feel, and it can be unique per person. But as long as you understand the mechanics of it, you can then relax in that space and trust it. So therefore, it'll allow you to just pick up on, the nonverbals, the nonverbal cues that they give with their, even if you're on the phone. You can feel nonverbals, you can feel energy, right? Or especially if you're face to face. You can pick up on that stuff because you're relaxed and you trust that, and you know from the mechanical standpoint what we're going for from a goal perspective, or what we're looking to find out around that. So when it comes to that piece, though, around, before I get into the black and white mechanics of it all, when it comes to that piece of our seeing our value in ourself, people had said like our self-worthiness, you know what I mean, that product. One thing to recognize, and this is just from experience there, is part of that is simply going to come with experience. And I hate to say that, but that's the reality of it, is that it's going to come with more experience. So most people, it's, how do you get better at that and seeing your value? Well, all you need is one person to hire you. like literally, it's getting your first client at whatever rate that you're going to be charging. And when you get that first client, all of a sudden you've broken a barrier, right? It's like, wow, someone bought me this, right? And then like another phase is like successfully completing, let's say, your 9 sessions or whatever sessions you have with them, and getting great reviews, meaning they're like, oh my God, this was fantastic, right? So having a satisfied customer. And then another one is obviously the more and more people get to hire you, but then another barrier you break through is that when a client sees so much value, when they're done their first, let's say, round of sessions, they rehire you because they want to continue working with you. That's another barrier that you break. And I will say this, with each, as you go along, there's going to be a point where you raise your prices, because most people, most of the time they start off too low, unless you hire someone like myself who's going to help guide you, because I'll make sure that you start at where you deserve to start, and I'll help you through those barriers to get you there. And that in of itself can make a huge difference starting at a higher price point. Not ridiculous, but most likely a little higher than you probably want to charge. Not only is it going to translate to you earning better income, but it's also going to translate to you breaking that barrier, not feeling like you have to raise your prices as much or as quickly, especially as you start to get booked up. But I'll tell you, even as people raise their prices, even as I've raised my prices went up, I think even last month. And there's always that little piece of like, I wonder if anyone's going to hire me. You know what I mean? But I know all the stuff I'm going to be teaching, so it doesn't last very long. But there's always that thought there, right? Because like, well, I know people have bought at this, but what about now at this? And so just recognizing that that's a normal thing. It just getting it to the point where it blocks you up, just knowing that you've just got to get that experience. So yes, having some practice, things like that, that's going to be helpful. But with that being said, let me get more into the mechanics of it, because when it comes to that value and believing that value in ourselves, I wish I could give you more pieces in terms of like where that can come from. But the reality is the more experience you start to get, the more value you're going to start to see in that. And the one tip I will give that's going to help with that is I have found that it's not even so much value in ourself and our ability to coach. That can be a piece of it very early on. But oftentimes, people haven't actually hired a coach or maybe a mentor for themselves yet. So they might have gone through a certification or a coaching school or whatever, and maybe they paid, and maybe some coaching was included in that. So technically they're paying for it, but it's different when you actually seek out a coach or a mentor and you kind of go through their process to hiring them and actually pay them. And actually give them, sign up for a credit card and pay them $2,000 or whatever it is, right? That's a really big process, and I'm sharing this because this has been my experience. Is that I went through my coaching school certification, and I had that coaching there, but I realized I never really hired anyone, from that process. And when I met my mentor for the first time, and he asked him to hire me, he asked me to hire him, and I did that. When I hired him. At the time, what was it? I think it was $2,000 for 5 sessions. So the price point was much more than I had ever thought I'd pay someone. And nor did I just have $2,000 kicking around, because I was growing my business and I was trying to figure things out. And so I had to put it on a credit card. But there was something in that as we began to work together. And here's a key point was, as I found value in our time together. Because 5 sessions is a pretty quick amount of time, you know what I mean? And to be spending, $400 a session at a phase where that's a lot of money, and for me, it was like, wow, it was worth it, right? And what I was receiving on the other end was worth it. So what that did for me was it allowed me to see the value in being able to charge and seeing that, wow, I never thought I would pay, especially that much money, or even any money for that matter, for something like this. And I just did, and now I saw value in it. So now I could begin to see how someone else might do that, because I was that person that I didn't think that I would do it, and now I did it, and it was valuable. So that was very, very helpful. And I'm not just saying for you, just go out and hire someone to hire someone. I mean, there's obviously, there's got to be a need there, but being cognizant of that process in terms of what brought you to the place where you think you need someone like that. And then also, let's say you've worked with someone. It's not bartering that service, or let's say you've paid them $100 a session or whatever they were charging you. The next phase to it is paying more for coaching sessions and having value. Like I said, I started off at that $400 mark with somebody. And then I worked with another person. I was paying them $500 a session. And I'll tell you, it wasn't just because, I had the money. It was just I needed help and I needed the mentoring, and I found value in that person. I really wanted to work with them. But what that did was now it broke price barriers for me. So in other words, if you want to charge $150 a session or $200 a session or whatever price point you want to charge, but you haven't ever paid that much for a coaching session, great, the first step was actually paying for it, but the next step would be paying more than that, and then same process and seeing the value. And again, I'm not saying just go find someone that's more expensive just to hire them, right? What I am saying is that if that situation is needed and you have a need, and find a person, and if it is more, if that price point's higher for you, that's going to be tremendously beneficial for you, not just hopefully from the value you get from working with that person, but since I'm talking about this topic today and finding, asking for the money, that's going to be tremendously valuable for ourselves. And that unequivocally translated into helping me become more comfortable asking for the money, because now I start to understand, wow, people will do this. And here's the thing is, and I emphasize the point that when I say I didn't have the money, meaning it wasn't just I had a great cash reserve or anything like that, or just like, oh yeah, I charged my $200, $2,000 on my credit card and then I paid it off the next day or the same day. You know what I mean? That's what I mean by I didn't have the money. I had funds, but that was a big expense, and so when I stressed that point, because now I could see someone who, quote, maybe doesn't have the funds available for an extra expense like that, to understand how someone could actually do that. And even last year, I got to the point where I hired a mentor for 3 hours. I drove to meet him down in like Stamford, Connecticut, where he lives. And so it was like a 2.5 so 5 hours back and forth driving. I spent 3 hours with him, and I invested $2,500 to meet with him for 3 hours. And he helped me out tremendously. And trust me when I tell you, I did not just have $2,500 just to kick around to say, oh yeah, I'll just go meet this guy for 3 hours. And the reason I'm sharing that is that brought me to another whole level in terms of seeing value for different price points and understanding how someone might do something like that. Because even prior to that, I was thinking, I'm like, I would never do that. Why would I do that? So that's a very, very helpful piece. And again, I reiterate, don't just go hire someone to hire someone and spend lots of money on them. Because again, you want to find someone and have a really big need that they can help you with. And in that situation, definitely seek that out. That can help tremendously. So with that being said, like some of those logistics that I'm talking about, what's going to help is, first of all, we're going to talk about timing of when to ask. That's going to be very helpful as well. And the process you go through, take someone through. So it's actually appropriate that we ask for the money, right? And the timing's right for that. But the one thing I'll say right now is when we get to that time, you've got to know what you charge. You've got to know what your prices are and be solid around those. And you can't be wishy-washy about that. So you've got to decide ahead of time, what is my package and what am I charging for that package? Those that are students of mine, you've heard me say hopefully many times that I recommend one coaching package, not a bunch of coaching packages. Again, it's going to confuse the buyer. Even if they are ready to buy, they probably are going to need to think about it. That to me at that point might be a legitimate, if you will, objection. I need to think about it, because you've probably confused them at point of sale by giving them too many packages and too many price points and too many options. People can't decide. They don't know whether they need 9, 12, or 20 sessions. You know what I mean? Like, well, how are they going to know that? So I recommend one package, one price. It's going to also make buying, like I said, that much easier. So for you, deciding on what that is, like I recommend 9 sessions, and then you figure out what price point you need to be at. Like I recommend, like at a minimum, I'd start you off at $125 a session, maybe $125 to $175. If you're starting off, I think that would be a really great price point to start at. Depending on who you're helping, that's a very reasonable and I feel fair price rate that can also translate to a fairly decent income, considering maybe working like 10, 12 sessions a month. Again, it's going to bring you close to that 6-figure mark depending on where you go on that scale. As you get closer to the $200 per session price point at 10, 12 sessions a week, that can definitely take you right up to that 6-figure mark. Just to give you an idea of where you can go with that from an income standpoint, based on 10, 12 sessions a week, which is what I find is on average you can handle fairly well without getting overwhelmed and just knowing who your clients are and being able to service them and still have time for your marketing, which takes up the majority of our time. So making sure that we know that price point, like I give you that recommendation, so when we get there, that's what we stick with 100% all the time. You don't offer discounts. You never offer discounts. Discounts don't work because you're devaluing your service, and that's very important. So and remember I said like earlier, like how do we begin to see value in ourselves? And I'm like, well, yeah, it's got to be from that experience. You've just got to get to that point of knowing your price point and being able to get it out when it's time to get it out, and sticking with that, and not like, maybe you charge 9 sessions for, let's say, $1,500, right? And you're ready to say it to the customer and you're like, oh my God, I think it's too much. And then you say 9 sessions for $1,000. And then you kind of like cheapen yourself right there because you think, oh my God, you know what, $1,500 is too much, but if I cut it down to 1,000, you know, they're gonna hire me. And the reality is we think about when we start to, this is the mechanics of this that I'm talking about now, is if we understand buying and value is, and you have to understand this from your experiences when you buy things. And this could be simply as buying a candy bar, you know, or buying deli meat, or buying a car. You know, it could be very simple things versus that. Like a quick example is like there's a store right near me, and I went there with my son because we wanted to get some lunch and I had everything at home. And the deli meat there for the exact same turkey breast was $7.99 a pound, whereas the other store like 2 miles down the road was a little further away, was $2 per pound cheaper, right? And this is what I mean by value. I want to share this because this is important to understand, right? Is that so for me, I knew it was $2 more per pound, and at the end of the day, it's like it's $2, right? But I'm conscious of those things, and I don't want to spend more than I have to, especially for the same thing. But the value of that $2 was worth it because that store is literally 2 blocks from my house. And I didn't want to spend time going to the other store because it's going to take a lot more time. It's a lot busier. And I just wanted to get home with my son because we were both starving. So the point is there was value in that for me, even though I consciously was spending more money. And again, it's only $2, but that's just it. The price doesn't matter. So even if now we're talking a larger price point, like $1,000 versus $1,500, right? If someone sees value in it for themselves, and you never can predict what value is, where value is going to be for somebody. And I wanted to use an off example like deli meat, you know, at a lower price point because I wanted to pull you away from the coaching so you can start to see it in an everyday life example. Is you can never tell why someone's going to buy something, whatever the cost is. You know, why is someone going to pay? I'm exaggerating. You know, $10 at an airport for a bottled water. It's like when that bottled water in a store can cost you whatever, $1. You know what I mean? It's because there's value in it right there. You're thirsty and you need something, and that's all you have. So therefore the value is there, and therefore someone buys it, right? There's reasons for that. So now let me back this up. People buy based on value, and we don't know what that value is, and it's going to be different for everybody. So now here's the mechanics of this, which is going to help us ask for the money a lot easier, is understanding, this is our job, understanding where the value is for each of our potential clients as we start to bring them through the process of hiring us. Right? So we've got to understand through this process from the time we meet them and we start interacting about potentially maybe working together, or they're asking about our coaching, all through that qualification process leading up to maybe a complimentary session, and at the end of that where we would ask for them to hire us, and we go over our prices if they're looking at doing that, right? So it's understanding where is the value for this person through that process of hiring me. So now how this helps me mechanically is if I start to understand that, and that's through obviously just being a great coach, asking questions and understanding those things, and even asking questions early in the process. You know, not only I talk about things with selling called need and timing, right? What is it that you're looking to achieve? How badly you want to do that? Why right now, right? And then why is it that you're considering hiring someone like myself to help you with that? Right? What value do you see in working with someone like myself? What are some of the things that would be helpful for you that you feel you can't do or have on your own? Oh, accountability. Oh, guidance, knowledge. You fill in the blanks, right? Those start to build value for something that you can provide for them. In other words, that if they don't have that, they're less likely, or they believe that they can't succeed or move forward with what they're doing. So now all of a sudden, if they can start to see you can provide that, or said differently, once they start to see that you can provide that, now there's value there, right? And so it's our job to be able to understand that. So as we go through that process, and especially as we start to ask those questions early in the journey, you know, what is it that you're going for? How badly do you want it? Why now? Tell me more about that. You know what I mean? Are you looking for help? Have you ever had help before? Would you ever consider working with someone like myself? What's most important for you? What are you missing? You know, and this is obviously grilling them at one time, but this is over the course of conversations and then even a complimentary session once we get them there. But we start to understand that, and as we understand those pieces, as we're, let's say, doing a complimentary session, we start to ask, I'm curious, are you starting to see the value in working with me? Where specifically is that coming from? Or what specifically are you experiencing right now where you're starting to see value in hiring me as your coach? It's asking those questions. It's getting that barometer. I know before we even came to today, you said that accountability was really important for you. How is it that I could best hold you accountable if you were to hire me as your coach? What would that accountability look like? So see what I'm saying? I'm starting to understand what that is because they value accountability. Great, and as a coach, I'm not going to pretend to know what they need or want for accountability. So I say, well, what does that look like for you? How would I hold you accountable? And then I'd say, great. So it sounds like if I were to do blah, 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 or if I were to email you, or if I were to, say X, Y, and Z every time we start our session, that would be very helpful for you. Great. So see, I'm starting to understand where that value is coming from. If that deli person he wasn't selling me the deli meat, so to speak, but he was preparing it for me. But if they asked me, hey, I'm curious, why are you buying this deli meat when you can, go 5 miles down the road and get it $2 cheaper, right? I might have said, well, right, and I would have given the reasons. And obviously the reasons for paying $2 more don't have to be very great, but they have to be enough for me to get past paying that $2 more. Otherwise, why would I do it? I wouldn't. All right. So those are the pieces right there in terms of starting to understand some of the mechanics. Is, hey, start to understand the value for that person, and where that's at. And here's what can happen is we talked about our self-worth and our own value, but what can offset that is knowing these mechanics, because when you start to understand and you start to see and even feel the energy of somebody on the other line, if you're doing something like a complimentary session via the phone, and you can feel the energy raise of that person, and they're giving you feedback like, oh my God, this is so great, or like, oh my God, yes, I can see how you can hold me accountable, and you're starting to understand these things. The more you understand, and especially if you're getting some of that feedback, what that's going to do is that's going to start to give you confidence, and it's going to start to allow you to feel like, wow, this person really can benefit from working with me. And even if you haven't done any coaching to that point, right, and you hadn't practiced at all, you're going to understand what they need so well. And hopefully at that point, you start to be able to see how you can provide that for them, because hopefully you've done some even practice coaching enough, or even if you just learned about the concepts and you've had some coaching experiences, you can start to see like, wow, I know where I'm going with that person. And that alone can give you that confidence, which again can reduce the amount of friction or apprehension or uncomfortability when it comes time to ask for that money. So now I want to address a little bit about timing, in terms of the timing of that, in terms of when we actually ask for the money, or even talking about our prices for that matter. But obviously we're talking about now, when do we ask for that money and how do we be able to ask for that so we feel more comfortable around it. And I believe that pricing, and then especially asking for the money, should happen and wait until they've decided that they want to hire us. Right? So I don't give my prices out, and I'm not going to say never, because I have given my prices. I gave my price out last week to somebody. I could tell they were in that position when we had a conversation long enough, and they just wanted to get a feel for it. It's not like I'm trying to hide them or keep them private. The point is that the reason why we don't necessarily share prices right away, or let's say publish them on our website as an example, not that that's necessarily a rule, rather I'd say for me it's a recommendation, is because you don't want someone prejudging an opportunity based on price, right? Because again, they don't know the value in it, because coaching is not a tangible, like I'm going to buy a TV or I'm going to buy a pound of deli meat, right? There's not a tangible value that they can associate it with something or compare it to something. It's essentially it's an experiential product, and in order to experience it and have value, they need to be going through something real that they really want. And if they're not, or especially if the timing's not right for that, there can't be value for them. And then at that point, it doesn't matter whether you say $1,000 or $1,500 or even $5. They're not going to buy, right? Because there's no value in it for them, because just the timing's not right, or the need's really not that big enough, or even if those other two factors are present, maybe they just feel like they or want to do it on their own. Or maybe they just feel like they need to give it a try on their own first and fail, and then realize, okay, I can't do this on my own. Maybe I do need your help, right? Maybe they need to fail first. Maybe they haven't gotten to that failure part yet. And sometimes people they're like, well, you know what? I'd rather, instead of spending $1,500, like, why don't I just give it a try myself? You know what I mean? But wherever that person is, we want to be able to understand that. But now going back to this, the timing piece is, I don't talk about those prices until I get to that point where they've decided that they've hired me. So rather, in the beginning processes where someone's going to be asking me, maybe they ask me my prices or tell me more about your coaching, I'm going to get right into that space of saying, hey, I'd love to tell you about that. Tell me more about why do you ask, or I'm curious why you ask, right? So I want to start to understand, what are they thinking right now? Where are they coming from? And again, of course, I'm going for what need do they have, and then of course the timing of that need, and then are they considering working with someone like myself? And that's where, if I start to find those things out, I can make an approach to maybe broach that topic and say, wow, it sounds like you really want to, I'll talk from my terms, from as I help coaches transition to full-time business, just translate this to who you're helping with what specifically, is I'll say, hey, it sounds like you really want to go after your coaching business right now. You definitely need some guidance, and now's the right time because, God, you've been doing this for 2 years, and it's just like, you know what? You're sick of and frustrated of just never moving forward, and you want that help. And that's if those two things are present, that's when you can make an approach and say, hey, would you ever considering hiring someone like me to work with you as your mentor coach to help guide you and kind of help ease some of that frustration or kind of streamline that process to take the guesswork out of things? And then if they're like, yeah, you know what, I would consider that, great. Why would you consider that? This is part of my qualification process, right? And if at that point we just got to go off of a gut from this conversation, and this could be back and forth email or from a social platform or even just face-to-face, let's say after an event or something like that. And if we get a good feel for that, then I'm going to take them to a complimentary session. I'm going to say, great, you know what, the next step would be, hey, let's set up a complimentary session. I treat it like I've already hired you. It's not only going to help move you forward, but it's also going to give you a really good feel of how we can work together and what we can accomplish. If that point you feel like there's great value in our work together, we can then move forward. We can get you in the schedule. We can go over pricing and take care of everything like that. How does that sound? And 99% of the time it's just like, absolutely, that sounds great. Assuming I've taken that time to qualify them, right? So now I'm going into that timing, right, of asking. And so now I get into that complimentary session. And through that pre-qualification process, maybe I called them up on the phone, maybe it was a back and forth via email. And then as I start the complimentary session, as I said, I'm rewinding back to the things I've just said, is starting to understand the value for them. Well, why would it be helpful if I worked with you? Oh, because you're frustrated. You've tried this many times on your own, or it just seems like you can't move forward. Oh, you can't figure out your niche yet, and you've tried, but you can't, or, whatever. Oh, you're getting leads, but you can't convert them to clients, right? So I'm starting to understand why they might be working with me or why they might want to even consider working with me. I need to find that value out. Why are they even here right now? Right? That's your job right now. And as I start that complimentary session, I'll talk about some of those things. So what are we working on? And even if we've talked about it, and those of you that have worked with me, you know that sometimes I'll ask something the same questions in just different ways, because I can never be too clear or to clarify where someone's going with that. And then through that complimentary session, I'm checking in with them and finding out how we doing so far. How's this working? In terms of what you need. Are you starting to see how I could help you? Are you starting to see how you could actually, become a full-time coach, through our work together? So forth and so on. Great. What specifically? And again, I'm not asking this all every time. It depends on where we are, what feedback I'm getting. So that's the, if you will, that's that in the moment per person barometer maybe that I was referring to earlier. But I want to now go back to what I said earlier is all I'm saying is you got to understand the mechanics, right? And the mechanics are understand where the value is for them. How it actually plays out in terms of what, when, and how much you ask them to understand that. You just got to, again, from practice, but just getting a feel. If you're, let's put it this way, if you're feeling confused and you don't know and you don't see it yet, then odds are they don't see it yet. And that's what I always say is like, if I don't know at any point where I'm at or how I'm helping somebody, it's my job to stop them and figure that out because maybe they're just as confused as I am, and it might be okay once they've hired me because we can readapt and refocus and readjust and go from there because we've got more time together. But in this process up to, qualification up to complimentary session, then towards the end of that, you only have so much time. So you want to make sure you know where you're at, and also that they're super clear on where they're going, because that's going to lead towards a successful finish at the end of this, And so now when it comes to timing, this is the point where I ask, right? This is the point where I ask, and also go over pricing, but only, and I want to stress, only once they've said they want to hire me. And that means I have to ask a closing question. You might have heard, salespeople, if you will, talk about, like, oh, I'm a great closer, or the close of the sale. And essentially what that means is like you've got to ask a closing question. And that basically means a yes or no question, like, do you want to buy, right? And so in our terms, it sounds something along the lines of, at this point, do you see value in hiring me as your coach? At this point, are you ready to hear all the details and move forward and hire me as your coach? Like it's a straightforward yes or no answer, and I want to understand where they're at, and I want to ask yes or no, and I want to listen. Like, are they like, oh my God, absolutely. Great. And I might even ask, depending on how strong that answer is. When I say strong, meaning energetically and enthusiastically, because I also recognize not everyone's going to be, oh my God, I'd love to hire you. I can't wait. Tell me what it costs. Not everyone's going to be just exuberant like that. And they might just be like, yeah, tell me more about that. Or I'd like to do that. And that might be like, well, tell me, so what is it? Where's the value for you? What have you experienced today where you can start to see yourself moving forward and being successful, let's say as a coach, as an example? And I want to almost make them prove it to me that they really do see this. Because here's what I know. Once I go in and I ask for the money, and once I go in and talk about the prices, now that brings them to a very logical state. That's when it becomes very black and white. Whereas the majority of people don't buy from that state. They buy from a state of emotion and energy, and it feels good, and oh my God, this is fantastic, and let me buy it. They get out of the car for the first time and like, oh my God, this is great. Maybe even they try the deli meat and they go, oh my God, this is delicious, I'm going to buy it, right? That's the experience. And that's where, when the experience is so great, it can offset the price. That's why if you ever searched for a home before, right? I mean, who's ever bought a home that's actually was in their budget? You know what I mean? I mean, if you need to qualify for more money, maybe that's a limiting factor, but you start going into homes and you realize, oh, well, geez, if we just spent 50 grand more, and if we just did this, or you're putting a new tile, or if you just did this, right? Every time that price point goes up a little, the experience goes there. And so again, they have that great experience. That's what we're really going for. And we ask them if they're ready to buy, if they want to do this, yes or no. That's when we go into that. But we've got to be able to understand that first, so we understand, and we can, if they get logical, once they go into that logical space of asking for the money, which everyone does to it. It depends on how far they go into it. I mean, I've had plenty of clients who were super ecstatic, and I knew they had decided, almost like it didn't matter what price point I gave them, unless it was stupid silly, that they were ready to hire me, right? But even those people, you could see them, they draw back a little bit and they go into a logical space, because they're thinking with a different side of their brain. It's not the emotional side, right? I think it's that right, more logical based side. They're not in their heart anymore. They're in their head, and oh, okay, where's this coming from? And they're processing what they need to process. So it's important for us to be able to take them back to that emotional place, should we get to a place where all of a sudden they're pausing, they're hesitating, they're kind of questioning, they're kind of going, well, I don't know, and blah, 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 right? So we've got to make sure we get to that space. But asking for that money in that space, the timing is right, because you've taken them through that process. And the more you follow and understand, if you will, the mechanics of what we're going for and what we're looking to understand at that point, that's where it makes it asking for it a lot easier. And then also, not only, I'll say it finishes this up from a mechanical standpoint, but like I said, when you get to this point, like I said earlier, you've got to know what your prices are, or your price is for your one package. Again, that makes it easier. And again, how it makes it easier for them is now they just got one thing. And it's not that they're deciding on which package. They've just got to decide whether they hire you or not. Are they going to hire you or not? Great. Don't have to decide on the package, because this is the only thing I offer, right? So that's not another decision. And now it's just a matter of like, all right, can you pay me in full, or do we need to break out the payments? Great. And now let's move forward. But so it's not only knowing the packages, and obviously knowing yours and what you're offering can help make that process easier and more comfortable. Because again, the more the client starts objecting and or hesitating or pausing, that can also now affect you, because now you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And I freak out, right? So that knowing those prices, but then also, if you will, your script at the end. And as I say, I'm not a scripted selling person, but and I don't say, hey, work from a script, but find out, just know what you're going to say at the end. Like when someone's ready to hire me and I describe my process, it's essentially the same every time because I've done it so many times. I don't read from a script, but I go into it and I talk about my 9 sessions, and I don't even give the price. I talk about what they're getting for that and what I'm going to help them with, and how long it lasts for, and where we can go from there. And then I close with my price, and I say I prefer to take that up front on a credit or debit card. And if for whatever reason you feel that you can't, pay that in full, we can talk about, potentially breaking that up to payments, because I never want money to come in the way of us, achieving what we can together. Do you feel that paying it up front works for you? And then I stop, and that's where you go from there. All right. But at that point, I'm not going to ask unless I know that they're ready to buy. And if they haven't gotten to that point, and if I rewind back to the point where I'm asking them, at this point, do you see value in hiring me as your coach, and you want to hear all the details to move forward and get in the schedule? And if they're hesitating, they're balking, I'm going to find out more about what that means before I go into my prices, right? So in other words, if I just ignored that and I went into it, that's when the timing's not right. Right? And you can relate it to any situation, like even just dating. When you meet somebody, it's just like, you're not going to just ask them to marry you on the first date. Maybe you will, I don't know. But that's a timing thing, right? You got to feel things out. And the same thing here, just because you're at the end of the complimentary session doesn't mean that you offer them and ask for the money and tell them your prices, right? I've gotten to the end of some complimentary sessions, and I haven't gone into that because they weren't ready to buy. And I could tell that they weren't ready to buy for whatever reason, and that's okay. If they're not ready to buy, no big deal, but I'm not going to go over the prices at that point.